I'm sitting here today with Pierre Gambart from Public Works Canada, and we're trying to get a little background information of how we got to today. So, Pierre, just to run through us, give us a little background information from where we started, back in 2007, the initial assessments, and I guess tell us a little bit of a story of how we got here today and where we're at today.
In late 2007, 2008, an assessment was conducted with Parks Canada and Public Works to come and take a look at the lighthouse. At the time, I believe there was a transfer of ownership from the Coast Guard to Parks Canada to take over the lighthouse. So they did an assessment, the two senior engineers. They looked at it from the ground, they did a walkabout, and they did a brief and rough condition assessment. They did recognize there's some work to do, and at that point it was left as is. The economy being what it was at the time, the government invested some money in called the Economic Action Plan. And then this project came back on the shelf, and they said, okay, let's make some work here for the local area and put this project on the front. That generated a condition assessment and developed a scope for the project repairs. This was about 2009, 2010 that it started. The first thing we did is we showed up here with a man lift, which elevated me and another stonemason, and we made sure the lighthouse was safe. Now at the time it was white, it was still open to the public, people would go in, the lantern was still working. And we showed up and we looked at it and we made sure that we could take off any chunks of stone which would be flying debris anybody down below. We were taking off chunks that were as big as this. And shards, very thin, almost like a hatchet size, kind of stuff. They could come down and it could penetrate and hurt people. So we were able to pull off the magnitude of about 10 5-gallon drums in that assessment. At the same time, though, we recognized some pretty severe conditions up on the upper part where the lantern you walk out around. And at that point, we said there needs to be further review of this, structurally speaking, much more comprehensive. And so following a week or two, Public Works showed up, and at that point, we deemed it unsafe for anybody in the local area. Then we also presented our findings to the Parks Canada group, and we said we got to go to work with this. Now, again, on the Economic Action Plan, there's an incentive to get this out as soon as we can, and so we put a tender package together. The tender package required recording of the stone conditions, and there were a few departments within the government that we collaborated with, and one was called the Heritage Conservation Group Directorate, and they came by and they recorded the lighthouse with 3D photographs. And we have an entire collection of the lighthouse in 3D in real life with stones. So from that, we were able to generate construction drawings, line drawings that contractors can bid on. And again, this is all still covered with the whitewash. And when we tendered it, we had a few contractors bid on it, and we anticipated doing the project over a year. And so when the project started, we had a contractor who was a masonry contractor who was very competent doing the work. He was able to remove the whitewash and remove all the contaminants inside. We had mercury, we had lead paint, so all kinds of hazardous contaminants. The masonry component, when we finally got to it after making sure everything was safe and removed for the workers to continue working, we started cutting open some joints. And joints are the mortar, the cement between the stonework. And it's at that point we recognized that the stones were virtually resting on very little mortar. This was just due to over the 100-year life of this lighthouse, water got into the walls and started washing out all the mortar. Mortar at that time was made with sand and lime and some local stones, not like today's cement.
So all the stuff that's left back here is the old original.
Oh, that's the original. That's why it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. So you can actually see with the light white little chunks in there.
Yeah.
Like the little flakes of snow. That's lime.
Oh, okay.
There's 30 mil. That's 100
That's all
mil.
good. Thank you.
And that's 150 mil. So basically, when we're raking out our joints, any joints that are under 15 mil go back 30. Anything bigger than that, we got to go back maximum 6 inches to remove all the hard mortar out of the joints pretty well. And that would put us over here. That there went back 6 inches pretty well.
Okay.
As you come along, as it's a smaller joint here, so it's under 15, so it's on about 4 inches in depth.
So the mortar conditions that were encountered once we had all the whitewash removed and the mason started cutting out the joints, we found that there was very little of the original mortar left, but it was full of new cement-based mortar which had been put in over the last 30 years. It doesn't work well with stonework, and that probably also exacerbated with the water coming in, freezing. It also is stronger than the stone, and we got these cracking conditions. So the mortar captured all the water, it didn't let the water evaporate, and now we essentially started having a large stone wall full of water. And in winter it freezes and ice expands, and we had some problems structurally speaking. So we stopped that construction project at that time, and we had to re-tender it all because now we came up with a solution to fill all the voids, and that was grouting. And so we made sure the existing contract, the contract was closed out fairly. We protected the lighthouse, and through the whole process of re-tendering, we were able to come back to construction a year later. So now what we have here is a project which has now a grouting component, and we have the same methodology for the stone repairs, and we have now completed the grout, and we're now into the stone repair part. And so we've taken out most of the original, the cementitious cement going back the last 30, 40 years, and we started to repair and replace stones. So when we have a chance to go look at it, we'll see that the joints have been opened. They vary in depth from 2 inches to 6 inches to 20 inches deep, and we put mortar in there. And after all that, we will then go proceed and remove the stones that are all cracked or shattered. The best way to compare a damaged piece of stone is if you take an ice block, you know, the old out of the freezer ice block, and you were to take a sledgehammer and you hit it, just hit it once. You'll see all the ice now is all shattered. It's still in one piece, but it's all shattered. That's the kind of stone conditions we're encountering up there. And so we're trying to fix that, and that is a challenge. And so we can either replace some of the broken shards of ice or stone, or replace the whole block. And that's stone by stone condition we have to go through and evaluate. So that's where we're at.
Well, my grandfather was a lighthouse keeper here for a fair number of years, and he was John A. Campbell. And when he retired, there was a John C. Campbell came in right behind him. And I can remember basically on Sunday afternoons being down here, and you know, people would want to go up in the lighthouse. So, as they say, you got the nickel tour, or maybe even up to 10 cents for an adult to go up, climb those 80-some steps to get up and have a look around. And it was quite a view. You could, at that time, there's no restrictions. You got outside on the balcony to walk around if you could, able to crawl out through the little hole that was there. So it was just a great experience. I remember riding down in the buggy from the farm at Amberley, where my grandfather would come up and help with the seeding or the harvest or whatever happened to be going on at the time. And I would ride down in the buggy and spend the night down here. And then he would quite often go back up the next morning and to help out Dad, help my father at the farm. I'd be in the neighborhood, maybe 6 or 7 years old at the time. But it was quite a drive. It was a great ride down in the buggy. Then there was a little barn where he used to keep the horse in here overnight, and we used to bring hay down in the when at haying time and put a load or two into the barn. And that barn now is one of the cottages that's just across the road here from the lighthouse. So it's been quite an experience for me as a kid growing up and being able to come down, climb the lighthouse with your grandfather, go up there. I didn't go up in the middle of the night when he had to go up to wind it in the fall, but anyway, it was just a good feeling to be down here, and maybe that's why we bought a place and retired down here ourselves. One time there was a tennis court just outside the window here, and I can remember it. I don't think it was ever played on in my time, but it was just outside the window, and there was the outhouse there was as well, because there was no indoor plumbing back then. So it was just an experience in itself being here back in, mid-40s, I guess you would say. One of the other incidences that happened, and I wouldn't advise it nowadays apparently, but because the light itself floated on a tub of mercury, there was always some stored down in one of the buildings. There was a storage shed down here, and always a little bit got spilt on the floor, and it was great fun trying to fish it out, get it out of the cracks in the floor, and gather it all up again. And sometimes you played around with it for a little while, but I don't know whether that would be advisable to do that nowadays or not. Also, I can remember back when Pine River United Church used to bring their Sunday school, or the whole congregation would come down here for their picnic, and we'd always had races and different games that we played, and it always ended up with a ball game. That was one of the main entertainments we had through the summer. And I can also remember a little bit later than that even, where we used to have bonfires down on the beach down here, and we'd play ball up on Reed's Corners, and then come down here for a wiener roast or a marshmallow roast. And there was a chap by the name of Werner Brown used to pick up the kids down here on his tractor and trailer and take them up to the Reed's Corners Park up there, and then the farm boys would play against the ones from the from the city. There's a lot of American children here as well, kids. So it was just great. He was a great organizer, Werner.
The Lighthouse Restoration Project has been underway for 4 years. It's now August of 2014. Today, we're speaking with Lyman Group site foreman Steve Ignacio. The stone to the left of the door is the largest stone that's been replaced in the tower. It's difficult to determine which stones are new and which stones are original to 1855.
We're removing this stone here because this one's already been set in and dried and cured. We're removing this stone, installing this one. The one where the spark is, that's where the next stone is going to be going, but that will have to stay because of just easier just to hold the weight of there, right? Yeah, yeah. And that's what we did on these top 6 course piles. So basically, what he's got to do is he's got to make shims of stone. Both starts on, I guess.
That's gorgeous. It's just gorgeous. And I noticed that you got these little,
these little groups here.
Yeah.
So what that is on our specs from the engineers here on this job, right at the back there.
Yeah, I see that shim, yeah.
So basically what he does is he measures and gets a shim for it. He'll cut it there and put it there. So basically that's what's holding up the stone back there. It just lifts up the stone for him to come back and point the mortar in there to get the mortar back there. So, and it's actually got the same height continuing through the course right around. Basically, and what he's doing is just let it dry a bit, and then he'll clean it to look something like this till all the tower's done. Once that's done, that's called back pointing. That finishes, because they haven't done much of that finish kind of work.
right.
So normally our joints are normally just straight, but because it's a rock face, they ask you to do concave joints. Because when the stone comes to us, it comes like this.
Right.
So we just try to do what we can from the outside, but it never matches up because of the angle of the window.
Right.
So now we'll have to finish this all. Markings on here.
Oh, okay. And what do you call that?
Bush hammer.
A bush hammer.
Yeah.
So then it'll look like the interior facing.
Well, that'll look like this part, which is on the side of the windows. This here is just a normal chisel that we use.
Each stone has been labeled with an individual ID. For example, row 53, stone L. The original stone to be replaced is measured. The measurements and ID are placed on a replacement block. Then the block is transported to Toronto to be cut. The block is then returned to Point Clark and installed at its precise location back in the tower. Then the finishing touches of chiseling and hammering the stone is done before finally being mortared. The replacement stones retain their ID number for future reference down the road until the stone has passed final inspection. What a view these guys had. The masons are currently raising the stones up through the scaffolding with an electric hoist. 155 years ago, these same stones would have been raised using horses, pulleys, and ropes. Looking out over Lake Huron, the lake looks like a boater's paradise. However, lurking beneath the lake surface is a rock shoal. The rock shoal stretches out into Lake Huron almost 3 kilometers, where boaters could step off their boat onto rocks and not get your knees wet. It may not be sunset time right now, but a view of the sunset is ever more dramatic from the top of the Point Clark Lighthouse.